Hugh,
Recording.
Okay. Today is October 25th. We're continuing our discussion on the Desiderata Extinctionati, and it's another open discussion. And we want to also talk about our next steps too. So, but we'll open it up.
Okay.
Gary, did you have a question?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to ask you, there was the discussion that we were having regarding having children, which you said other people might be interested in. And Mike and I have already discussed this, and we've worked it all out for you. But I don't know
what you decided. What did you decide?
Well, yeah, give us a digest.
Well, the thing is, do you want to go through it again? So, because I mean, Sophie, want to get Sophie up to speed, and everybody else who anyway. Well, I think the other two people have already been with us all along anyway. Do you want me to put the question to you just briefly and you can answer it again, or do we want to read out what you wrote?
Oh no, just ask the question and then tell me what you discussed.
Yeah, okay. So the question was put to Hugh by an insolent disciple of his ashram. Dear sir, you've had children in recent history, and given that you are A, an enlightened person, and B, under no illusions about the rotten state that the world's in, how do you justify having brought these two kids into the world? And the questioner was coming from the point of view of thinking that was a cruel or not a good thing to be bringing kids into this kind of world. The questioner also had in mind those two videos that were posted of John Taylor Gatto, the New York school teacher, who was basically saying that the state just takes your children from you and they're born and just feeds them through their sausage machine for corporate purposes, and you don't have much to do with this processing of children by the system. And as a result of that, Hugh sent back a fairly detailed reply in which you drew an analogy to the argument that you had against veganism about it being unnatural, and can you take it from there, Hugh? Have I got you started? Do you want to talk from there about what your
So I think unless I got you wrong, I think that the place you're coming from is where a lot of doomers are at, and that's, I can think of one particular one. I don't name him, but he's got a YouTube channel, and he's very proud of his vasectomy, which he got in his teen years.
Yeah, Mike and I have gone into that because it wasn't being recorded.
And then somewhere along the line I had to disable the comments for this kind of stuff. It was basically I picked up a whole lot of, I think after interviewing Derek Jensen, I picked up a whole lot of Pentilincola fans, and they were fucking awful. There's no other word. Basically, it's and that's why I compared it to veganism, because there's something amiss with that crowd, and it's if you followed all my shtick, then according to me, the whole source of the world's problems is ego personified by the alien cortex. But the alien cortex is the devil inside us, right? So, and that's what's caused all the shit that we now have to live, right? Now, the thing that's wrong with this crowd is that they have a fully intact doomer ego and a very polished kind of alien cortex. So it's kind of world-hating and self-hating and misogynist and and basically they're kind of anti-human, right? And kind of proud of it. And I think that that's a kind of double dealing that's not really acceptable, because it's the alien cortex, unreformed, undeveloped, and basically hating itself. So it's an alien cortex self-loathing. Now, this whole thing about the vasectomies and stuff, and this just relishing in it, that kind of thing, according to my way of thinking, is the psychology of self-castration. And this, what they're doing is very close to what I mentioned, like Origin. It's a very kind of religious thing. And what it is in terms of my psychology, my kind of rationalization, is the alien cortex is trying to divorce itself from the world. If you want to go into the psychology, it's very interesting. But in if I was Sam Buckner, I would say that it's mother issues, and in this case, it's and also female issues. So in this case, it's a hating of Cybele, it's hating of Gaia, it's hating the world, and it comes from the fact that really a rejection of mortality. So it's like the Christian thing where it's mortification of the flesh. So it basically, somewhere along the line, the alien cortex, there's a Pentylencola says very clearly where it happened. You can see where it happened, where he was very attached to nature, almost like his mother, and then they built a road through his playground or whatever, and then he was incensed with that, and that kind of launched his whole career. What I think the underlying psychology is, he realizes that he's mortal. His mommy nature can't save him. And then what's bound in, particularly the Doomer thing, is a kind of recognition that mommy, in terms of the planet and the universe, gives us life, but she also takes it away. And that's the bit that they can't handle. Is that Cybele, it was well personified in Cybele. Now, there's a very, very interesting thing about Cybele and Attis. Cybele's Gaia, the Earth Mother, the universal religion before we had this masculine figure, this Apollonian masculine figure that Pentylencola kind of personifies. And so Cybele is associated with Attis. Now, Attis is a Christ figure. If you look on the internet, everybody says, "Oh, Christ is just Mithras," and says, "No, that's a misunderstanding." Most scholars recognize that Christ is actually Attis, and in fact, Paul, when he started evangelizing around Turkey, where Cybele's temple was in Mount Ada in Anatolia, in Turkey, right? And when Paul came, you can clearly see it in the Bible. When Paul came to these places like Ephesus, all the guys immediately accepted Jesus and said, yeah, well, we have no problem with that. We know he's Attis. And Paul went, "Who the fuck's Attis?" And they told him about Attis, and he went, "No, not Attis. No. And the church has been doing that all the way along, saying, "No, not Attis," where it's clearly Christ is Attis. So it's a fascinating story, because the Pope sits on Cybele's throne. Basically, if you go to the Vatican, it's Cybele's temple. He even sits on Cybele's throne, and he has Cybele's cap. That yarmulke thing that the Kobe is Cybele's cap. So the church has always had this battle against Attis and Cybele, and then God the Father and Christ. Now, to the extent that it's quite marvelous. Basically, I'll tell you a bit of the trivia here. When the Pope gets elected, They sit him on a chair with a frock. Part of the thing that you have to do to become a pope is you have to go through this test. And then basically he sits in this with this big schmuck naked underneath and on this special chair. And the chair has a hole in it. And he puts his junk through the hole. And they have this trusted guy that comes along and feels his junk and goes like, uno pene, due testiculore. And then it's like, oh, yeah, okay, he's good to be the Pope. Now, what is all that about? The reason is that Sibylline's priests, her followers, were called the Galli, and they castrated themselves. So what the church, the Christian church, because they were sitting on Sibylline's throne in Rome, they really usurped Sibylline's throne, they were always under risk that one of the old guard from Cybele or the Galli or I'll go into it more. But they were always at risk that they would be, get one of these civilians that would take over the Christian church and then say, okay, fuck this God the Father thing, we're going back to the Holy Mother. And so Christianity was always about suppressing the mother. It's like Father, it's the Trinity is obviously Father, Mother, and Son. But they couldn't have the mother because of Cybele. So they reduced her and said, oh, she's just a ghost in the background. So it's, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. And it's like, But anyway, the reason why they have to get Cybele out of the picture is she is Gaia. She's Mother Earth. She's nature. And so then they're saying that this is, super nature, God. It's an Apollonian thing against mortality and dying. Basically, if you're mortal and you incarnate, it means you're going to die. So the alien cortex does this huge Apollonian thing to try and divorce from nature. And part of that divorce is a divorce from the attraction of like your animal nature. So it's a divorce from sex. It's a divorce from carnal pleasures and stuff like that. And so Attis, the story of Attis was, he was a very successful guy. He was good looking. He was famous. He had lots of friends, loads of money. He had it all. And it wasn't enough for him because, this kind of Gilgamesh thing, he's still concerned that he's going to die. He's still concerned that he's mortal. So he gave up everything like a monk and went to Anatolia, to Cybele, where she exists in the forest with cypress trees, which represent death. And he took a sharp stone and cut his nuts off for Cybele. And then this is all in a poem by Catullus, and a lot of people analyze what the fuck's going on. Well, Catullus tells you what's going on. He says, for hatred of Venus, he castrated himself. Now that's what a lot of those Pentylincola Dumas are doing. They have this thing about ecology and environmentalism, but it's also, there's a kind of a hatred in it too. They kind of hate nature too. And so it's like veganism, because veganism pretends to be green, but it's a hatred of nature. If you don't hate nature, you're fine with eating animals and being eaten. It's that second part they can't take. It's being eaten. So ecology is a way of quarantining nature and quarantining Cybele and basically saying, we're the boss, we're keeping nature safe. And then you go on Monga Bay and you have a hernia every time, a chimp gets it. And basically, those guys, they don't actually like nature. Have a look at them and see how much time they spend in nature. They actually abhor it. So
I find the same with feminism and the hate of women too. I mean, honestly, I'm a woman. We can go back to that, but it's associated. Sorry for the interruption.
Yes, but they hate women. They hate the mammalian brain because it represents Cybele. That it's an attraction and a repulsion. They attracted, and that's why you get all this kind of very syrupy, sentimental Monga Bay type of thing about ecology and environmentalism. It's a very flowery view of environmentalism. Even hard ass like Pensacola has this very sugary view of nature. It's not nature as, as I know it, but it's so there's the attraction, and then there's the repulsion. It's Freud said this about vagina dentata. It's basically a vagina with teeth. You know, that's Attis's problem. Is he's attracted to the vagina and Cybele and nature and life. He's attracted by life, but if you engage with life, it implies death too. That's what he can't take. So basically, to free himself from that, he castrates himself. And that's the continual thing. You see, then Origen does the same thing, early Christian father. It's continual problem all the way that the church has been having. A lot of the celibacy is kind of a token castration. Castration has been a problematic theme in Christianity all along. And the reason is it's rejecting Cybele and the mother and nature, and basically trying to divorce yourself from nature, because nature implies your death. And so it's kind of life-hating and death-hating. Anyway, it's important what happened to Attis, because Attis castrated himself for Cybele. Now, what happened to Attis for doing that was Cybele was immensely angry, because in essence, by castrating himself, he was removing the chain that Cybele had on him, the attraction of Venus, right? So he was, by desexing himself, he's kind of got away from her spell. And so, but she doesn't like that. And she came and set her, she was always associated with cats and lionesses. The very first statue is the Lion Man of Willendorf. But he's not a man, it's a woman. It's basically the female goddess. And she was a lioness in Egypt. She's Sekhet. And she's always got lionesses, often pulled by a chariot with lionesses. And so what she did was, she was so cross with Attis for castrating himself that she launched her lionesses on him. So she took her revenge. So the path of Attis is a disastrous one. And so that's the thing is that it's an attempt to escape submission to nature. So it's an attempt to escape submission to Cybele. See, Cybele's the boss. You can't get away from it. Like motherhood and apple pie, you just go against motherhood and apple pie. The thing why anti-civ is never going to get anywhere is if you go on Reddit or something like that and you say anything anti-civ, the women jump on you. The women jump on you and cream you. The women are never going to let us deindustrialize. And so the fact that we will not be able to deindustrialize means that we're going to be toast. So that's what it means that Cybele, basically launches her lionesses on us. Basically, climate change, collapse, catastrophe is nature's revenge, and so she's going to take her revenge. Now, the healing grace in all of this, where you're supposed to get to, is submit to Cybele. You say, like, she's considered like a cat because she plays with us like a mouse. She gives us life. She lets us run around like a little mouse, and then boom, she stomps on us. Now, in the shamans taught you that we are Cybele's mouse. Just play the game, be the mouse, give her pleasure, and die. Now, that's a healthy psyche. What these guys are trying to do is say, I'm not going to be a mouse. I'm not going to submit to this cat, knowing that nature's this cat. And so it's a defiance of nature. That's the essence of this doomerism. And so then you get this this kind of attempt at a divorce, so that if you can, it's done in terms of, say, all the techno-utopians, they kind of like, we're going to transcend nature. The economists say, we're going to decouple. It's like you can't decouple from Earth. It's like you're decoupling from oxygen. You just cannot do it. You have to submit to nature. You have to submit to Gaia and the Divine Mother and all the archetype. You have to do that. But no one wants to. They want this Apollonian thing. Well, not everybody. I mean, our alien cortex doesn't want to. So it tries Veganism, say, I'm not an animal. I can make choices. I won't eat animals. And the implication is then I won't get eaten. It's like, come on, the worms are going to eat you. You're not going to get away. So it's this kind of infantile psychology. And the more domesticated we become in our urban civilization, the more this becomes problematic. The more we have, it's kind of like the more we infantilized, and the more Gaia and Mother takes on this matronly, this kind of very scary figure. I find that matronly figure, the left-wing kind of mother knows best figure, the nanny state and so socialism, I find very, very scary. It's kind of like Mary Poppins, The thing that scares me about Mary Poppins is she'll have your nuts off in a heartbeat, and she'd be just like, oh, it's just a little snip, snip, and there we go. It's like, oh, fuck you. It's just a little, that's what it is for you. It's everything for me. So it's just so easy to just castrate the man. Just a little problem. Snip, snip, and on we go. And that little, that matronly Mary Poppins figure is a frightfully scary figure, especially for Linkolas and guys on YouTube channels, Duma YouTube channels. And so, but it's a very funny relationship because they're on the left, and the left is all about the unholy alliance between the mammalian brain and the alien cortex. So it's women don't understand this, especially women on the left. They think in terms of like, what's your problem, and they don't understand the psychology of the Apollonian psychology and this basically immortality project on the masculine side. So okay, so then part of it, just last thing, part of it is not having children is also an attempt to deny that you're an animal and a procreating animal, and you're part of nature. Yeah. Anyway, long story, but there you go.
Can I say something? Can I add to something? Because you've talked from the point of view of a man, and I'm talking from a point of view of a woman and a mother and a grandmother. I had 2 kids, and I have 2 grandchildren, 2 granddaughters. I worked all my life in family planning mostly, and reproduction. And I was an obstetrician first, and then I specialized more in women's health and reproduction. And also, I always had some deep questions, ethical. Why would I, abortion, pill, vasectomies? All that was my bread and butter every day. I was counseling couples for vasectomies. I was counseling young people for what method of contraception to use, and I was kind of thinking I was at least doing something kind of useful in my little niche there. Because I could see the trend of how things were going. I also had to face those extreme Christians pro-life when we tried to get the abortion in Ireland. I was not in a camp. I'm not in isms at all, but I've been observing all that. I've got a very good experience hands-on of all these things. I've also seen the rise of sexually transmitted infections. At one stage I was wondering, should we treat them? Because the rise of infertility was enormous. I don't know. I follow exactly what you're saying, Hugh. I understand exactly where you're coming from. We have to submit to nature, and that's always been my motto and my kind of instinct, And I've always tried to run away from these camps and these either feminist or reproduction rights or anything, even though I've completely been in the line of what you'd call the leftist, because I tried to implement choice for women, and everywhere I worked I tried to help them not have 10 kids if they didn't want to, or that sort of thing. But I have encountered, I have so many questions about reproduction, and I've worked all my life in it, and I still don't know. I don't know. It's just, I really don't know. I don't even know if what I've been doing has been any good. Contraception, I've had so many. I was doing it all the time and prescribing, and I was seeing the side effects of pills and coils and all sorts of things, and I was thinking, I'm putting more drugs in the environment, and at the same time I can't deny those girls to have a bit of good time. And it was, I was in the middle of this civilization that that I hate, and I had to do with I could only had to use with what I had and my hands, my tools, and things like that. All I wanted to say is that I don't know. The question of having children. Why did we have children?
Well, the thing that immediately sprung to mind when you were talking there is that we're in the civilization trap. So you can't come late in the day and say, oh, you know, having a debate about one-child policy or contraception and stuff is like, you know, well, we're 10 minutes away from the gas chamber in Auschwitz. And then you're saying, you know, how should we manage, you know, the population in the death camp? It's like, it's too, the first thing about our population is too damn late. It's basically, you can have kids or not now, it doesn't make any difference. So just in terms of my decision to have kids was, I kind of see it from a number of angles, but one of them is that I don't agree with the thing about not having kids in front of the steamroller. I think that's a big mistake. Life is. I said to Gary that it's just like, you know, Shakespeare and love. Life and love are the kind of the same. It's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. And it's better to have lived 5 minutes than it is not to live at all. You see, you're making huge egotistical assumptions about saying about having kids in front of the steamroller, because from the kids, but you're thinking of it from your point of view. But think of it from the kids' point of view. If you might have a fantastic life in the middle of collapse. I mean, if you look through history, but you particularly something like you know, the third man, you know, Harry Lime. He says, you know, we had you know, basically 500 years of peace, democracy, and brotherly love in Switzerland, and you got, you know, basically the same 500 years, you got death, the Borgias, you know, wars, revolutions in Italy. And what happened in Italy? It led to Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, the Renaissance. And what did they get out of all that in Switzerland? Peace and brotherly love. The cuckoo clock. So it's a damning thing to assume that you see what these kids are doing now, saying, you know, antenatal is saying like, well, they can't have the life I lived, so therefore their life isn't worth a damn. You say, like, that's terribly narcissistic and self-centered. So and also it's kind of, it's the same rhetoric that we get shoved over and over. It's the capitalist rhetoric. It's the rhetoric that started the whole problem. The capitalist rhetoric is seeing kids as a resource. They think it's my kids, my decision, and all that kind of thing. That's what started all the problem. It's seeing the reason why we overpopulated now is because capitalists wanted more kids, because of the same reason why farmers want more cows. So then you can't come in this latter day neo-capitalist thing and say, you know, late stage capitalism, and then say, oh, it's all about personal choice, and in particular market choice. It's looking at kids as, you know, shopping and saying like, well, I'm making a consumer choice, and kids are not a fucking consumer choice. You know, the fact that we're talking here, it means that we've had an unbroken line for 3.4 billion years back to a primordial pond. If you don't have any kids and you break that line, that is pissing on billions of organisms that basically successfully reproduced all the way down to us. And you break it. Why? Because I'm a precious little fucking liberal and I'm going to make a consumer choice not to have kids because that too many people on this planet. It's like, it's just another one. It's it's basically, then they're going to go shopping. You know, oh, I made that choice, now I'm going to go shopping, and it's complete insanity. Okay, like, just to ground it in the insanity is, if you live in Britain or America, whether you have kids or not is utterly irrelevant to the state of the planet, right? Because America and Europe, the population is declining. Now, the UN says that the population in America is about 320 million now. It'll go to 400 million in 2050. That 100 million, 25%, comes from immigration. So you say, well, why the hell, this is like Linkola asked, is why the hell are we letting people come from, impoverished areas to become planet eaters in Europe and America and OECD countries? It's a crazy thing. If you're worried about overpopulation, then, well, you should be pro-Trump and have the wall go up 10 miles higher. The reason why capitalists want that influx of 100 million, I came in on that ship, by the way, to America. And it's basically, America is built on a fraud. If you go back, the engine of economic miracle of America was all immigration. If you put 10 grand in each one of those immigrants' pockets, you can basically show all the GDP growth that America's ever had. GDP growth will go negative if they don't have immigration. And they never say that. No, left or right will never say that, but that's the truth. But even so, it's irrelevant. Even so, even the Linkola argument is irrelevant because now it gets really, really politically incorrect. And that the entire fate of the planet is in China's hands. It's got nothing to do with us. Your precious choice as a liberal to, have kids or not have kids or recycle, it's just complete fantasy. You're fucking insane. Just fucking basket case insane, because you're not looking at the facts. The facts are, it's all about China. China has 1.4 billion people. The kids that they're going to have, even if they just had one child, they're going to add an extra billion people before 2050. At the moment, they have half the standard of living of America. We cannot support America, by the way. It's just too many people living too high on the hog. But in China, they have half the living standards of America now. The Belt and Road Initiative, they're going to try and push that to exceed America's consumption per capita before 2050. And that's including having an extra billion people. If you add in, and that's going to be done on solar panels, you can see how fucked up we really are. Basically, it's not going to be on solar panels. It's going to be by coal-fired plants that they put in other countries that are Belt and Road Initiatives, so they can claim they're being green and stuff. It's a complete fraud. But it's basically we are stuck, because the only thing you could do is some kind of genocide. You could just basically nuke China or release a virus but that's the only thing you could do to save the human population now. And it's not going to happen. Nobody's going to do it. It would be a black swan really, really out for. So if you're a liberal in a Western country, just stop going to XR. It's pointless to lobby your government. It's pointless to look at new renewable energy because China, our fate is entirely in China's hands, and that's just the reality of it. And so, yeah, it's unless something happened that would stop those extra billion, but the people that are going to have those billion are already just reaching puberty now. So it's if like Gosling talks about peak child and stuff, it doesn't matter about peak child. It's the population is going to tail off not because of the demographic transition. Population is going to tail off because of the collapse. So we've reached the limits to growth, and all those billion in China those are babies born in front of the steamroller. So their fate is not quite the same as ours. So I mean, if I was Chinese, I must say I would really think twice about having kids. But yeah, I mean, in America, it's not quite the same. And my kids are having the best time of their life. They've decided really not to have kids because of the steamroller argument. But they have had a wonderful life so far, and they're having the best time of their life. Their biggest concern now is not the collapse, because they've heard it all from me. Their biggest concern is that they're not living their best life, that they're not living balls out and just and not, basically they're not drinking life to the lees. They're not going to die ripe. So it's basically, the ripeness is all. You can die as a 2-year-old in front of the steamroller and live a ripe life. So it's a real shake-up. This whole topic of conversation, the complete shake-up for all our capitalist ideas. But the first thing is to know is that the reason why we got overpopulated is because of capitalism. It's basically, if you read Against the Grain and James Scott and stuff, it clearly explains there is that we made the devil's bargain, and particularly women in this case, not to get too misogynist, but in terms of domesticating ourselves, it was the worst idea ever, because it made child mortality, it was brutal from the point of view of child mortality. It's basically child mortality just went off the charts. It just so happened that fertility also went off the charts slightly more. And basically that dividend, it's kind of like making a profit out of extra hands. So I'm at the risk of boring everybody. I'll just say one more thing on this, and that's about the demographic transition. So there's a fundamental misunderstanding in academics about the demographic transition. You hear, even Derek Jensen and stuff say something, stuff, and it's kind of what they're doing is they've confused correlation with causation. So you hear this thing as, oh, you just have to educate a particularly woman, and then that stops overpopulation. It's like horseshit. It's just a correlation. So what's happened in China and all over the world is urbanization, right? So that's what makes overpopulation is urbanization. Now people think, well, this is very strange because, basically, as soon as people are urbanized and their standard of living goes up, they stop having kids and get to the demographic transition. This is what's happening. That academics don't understand is when I grew up in Africa, right? Then our maids would continually come to work having the shit beaten out of them. They had black eyes, and you always knew what the story was going to be. And that's that basically their boyfriends, they don't have husbands in Africa, right? Their boyfriends they're basically polygamous. They're in our natural state. Their boyfriends, it was always the same story. Their boyfriends beat them up because they found they were taking contraceptives. So you think, well, this is strange, because if there's one thing Africa needs, it needs population control. Now, what academics think is, well, if you just educate the women, is they're almost like, well, if you just teach them about condoms, then they start. It's not like that. The reason why, if you educate women, it shows basically they reach the demographic transition is because it's a correlation effect that they, when they're educated, it changes the economics. So the reason why these guys are beating up the women for having contraceptives is they're ruining their retirement plan. The guys are having kids, so it started, basically in a rural setting. It's great to have kids. They're free labor, and it's well paid for by the extra mouth to feed. So what happens then is when you half urbanized, half industrialized like they are in Africa, that doesn't really change when you go to the city when you're poor. So these guys, although they are living in the city, it still applies. The guys have enough kids when they don't have an IRA or a 401k or a pension plan or a state pension. They're having lots of kids so that they have a lot of people to call on when they're on their old age. They can go and knock on the door and say, hey, it's your old dad. Hey, spot me a $5. And so that's what they're doing, right? So now this is important from the point of view of a demographic transition. What happens if you educate the woman is then they get a job, then they banked, they're part of the financial system, and then basically they have pension plans and stuff, and then that changes the whole thing. But here's the problem. Look at the cost of that. The cost of that means they are a Western consumer, and the planet's it's a terrible bargain for the planet. The planet's had to turn them into fucking planet eaters just so it could stop them having babies. And that's the problem. And that's what demographers don't understand. And that's what ecologists don't understand too, is that you've made the devil's bargain, is that to reach the demographic transition, they have to get about 11 grand a year, 11, 12 grand, about a grand a month, something like Mexico's standard of income, right? to get to that standard, right? The Mexicans now have reached the demographic transition, but you can look at their diet. The demographic transition, instead of looking at it in terms of money, you should just look at it in terms of Coca-Cola. So how much Coca-Cola does a family consume? It's basically how Western they are, how much of a planet eater they are, how integrated they are in with the financial system, the global financial system. And you look at Mexicans, then they drink a lot of Coca-Cola every month. It's basically, this fabulous amount. And then, by the time you get to the average American who's maybe earning 3 times that, they're getting like big gulps and stuff, at McDonald's. And then that's the problem. Because, to get them to the demographic transition, then it means their carbon footprint and their footprint on this planet is vast. So there's no way we can get China to the demographic transition. It basically means people have to be urbanized. And cities can't be made green. That's the second misunderstanding of demographers, is that cities are not green. It's not a question of how many plants you can intensively put in a plant box and do intensive cultivation in a city and stuff. It's basically those plant boxes, they still need phosphorus. There's no free lunch, right? Literally, there's no free lunch. So you have to, there's no such thing as a green city. It has a vast consumption emission footprint, and that can't change. You can't solar panel your way out of that. So anyway, that's the overpopulation debate, according to me. Anyway, sorry I dominated so much time, but the complicated subject.
No, well, you said you wanted to deal with it. Mike and I have done a lot of talking. Sophie, do you want to spend? You've got things to say, I'd imagine.
No, I'm listening. I understand exactly what Hugh is saying. The civilization trap, where we have all been at our age anyway, working, and maybe not you, Mike, yet because you're younger. But yeah, I know, and all those questions I've had in my working life, and before I escaped, I can see. No, I don't have something to say just right now. I was thinking also of India, not just China too at the moment. I was also noticing a thing that's quite important, is that the ratio men to women in those 2 continents, or 2 countries, nearly continents, is very similar to the one of Africa, where you have much more men than women. That might have a bearing on reproduction, whatever Mother Nature is doing around there, I don't know. Plus, there's an enormous rise in infertility in China, whether due to infections or due to pollution-related reproduction system failures, especially in the sperm count, but also in lesions in young girls to their ovaries, and sluggishness of ovulation. So that's just facts that I'm reading and gathering and thinking about, and in life and children and reproduction and where we are. That's all. No, I must say that what you say, Hugh, I exactly understand, and thank you so much for putting it in these words, because it just helps to clarify intuitions and a lot of things that you feel for years. And thank you very much. I'm very grateful for that. I'd love to hear what you and Mike were talking about, guys.
Oh, I think I'll pose a question, because I'm speaking from like a young person, or a person, we don't have kids, but a lot of us are in the mindset that we don't want to put kids into that situation of a managed extinction. So assuming, or if we're able to get our heads around it, it's seeing that, I see it as a damned if you do, damned if you don't, because like Hugh just mentioned, the demographic transition, and also the use of plastics and other materials just to create these contraceptives. Those are things that I didn't really consider. But assuming that we know this, and let's say we end up having kids, how would mother or father navigate their life with their kids now that we're heading into this scenario, the steamroller scenario. And also that we're in a civilization trap, that we're subjecting the kids to everything that civilization is offering, like schooling. I mean, assuming that we're living in civilization still. Yeah, just wanted to hear your thoughts.
Do you want to answer, Sophie, or should I? So it's kind of neutral. It's important if you're making a decision to have kids or not. I wouldn't say that it's one way or the other. It's kind of neutral. It's important to know what you're doing, in terms of that you're going to struggle to support them traditionally, right? So, like, if you they're going to be changes, right? I would think, and it's the wrong analogy to think of having them in front of the steamroller. It's basically, you're having them at a time of storms. So now it depends a lot on what type of person you are. You see, my life's had a lot of ups and downs, and I like it that way. It's from early childhood trauma. If you get the dial set up real high in your childhood, you don't want to set too low after that. So yeah, I love the drama. I was lucky that my wife was the same, and she liked the drama too, not as much as me. I challenged everybody, but here's the thing, that she had fantastic times in the ups and downs. I mean, to the extent is that in all sorts of ways. So, for example, if you're a selfish millennial, you might be thinking in terms of, well, they're going to be terrible things, they're going to be storms and stuff like that. Now, I remember one particular thing where I had to travel in California. We lived in San Francisco, and there was an incredible storm when I was away from home traveling for work, and my family called me and said there was a fucking hurricane. The roof blew off the house, and they took shelter under the table, the kitchen table. And so I was worried shitless. But the thing was, they had an absolute ball. When I got back, my wife and kids were just over the moon. They said they were so damn exciting. My kids were saying, "Dad, you wouldn't believe this tree fell down on the house next door, the roof." And they said there was lightning and stuff. And they said it was a gas. Yeah. Now, it depends what your family is like and what you're like. And I'm just giving you that as an example to say it's very alien cortex to make these assumptions, right? If you fine with going it alone, becoming a homeless person, having a kid in tow while you're a hobo in the 1920s, kind of thing like that, it might be the best thing known to man. It could be the worst thing known to man if you have the wrong mindset too. So, but you can't say it's not what these millennials are saying, because they're coming from should I make this consumer choice? And they say, well, Consumer Choice magazine says don't have kids. And they say, like, it's nothing to do with that. And anyway, we don't really know how this pans out. You might be the only survivors. Imagine if the fucking alien spaceship comes down and then they say, like, okay, we've come to rescue you. And you say, oh, bugger it. There's no, basically there's no childbearing age people left. We decided not to have kids. And it's like, oh, crap. Well, no point in rescuing a couple of, geriatrics on a dead planet. So you don't know. Maybe Mike and whoever is basically the population that populates the new world, right? So you don't make too many assumptions about how this goes down, right? Life is not predictable, right? So I mean, we've had this discussion before. It's predictable in some ways, like you can tell what the odds are. I mean, you can't do the impossible. You can't load straw on the camel's back indefinitely. It's going to break. But you can't tell which straw is going to break it. You can't tell where you're going to be in that break. So I wouldn't recommend people to make such a binary decision. It's and again, it's this control narrative. It's the same darn narrative that we have control and stuff, and that's what's going to hurt you. So in the decision to have kids, you're missing the point. It's not whether to have kids or not. It's your attitude. That control attitude is all wrong. That's like a prepper attitude. It's trying to like say, I know how this is going to unfold. And so you got a little, bug out thing and you've got it all stacked up. And that's not how a collapse happens. I'll tell you that it's going to be different. Whatever you think is a prepper, it's going to be different. That's a good enough rule to go by. So it's the same applies to having kids, is sort your fucking mindset out. It's more important than the decision to have kids or not. Basically, let that take care of itself. If we had have done that all the way along, right, we wouldn't be in the civilization trap now. We wouldn't be in overshoot and collapse now if we had followed those same instincts. So stop trying to be artificial. Stop trying to be so alien cortex. The alien cortex got us into this problem. It's still playing chess when it's already beaten. So we're fucked. It's checkmate. It's just, some people realize it's checkmate and some people don't. But, a lot of people are analyzing the moves and still haven't got it. But it's checkmate. And so it's like, ask yourself, you're on the Titanic. You've got N number of years. You don't know how many, but you know this thing is going down and there's no rescue. Do you have kids or not? Why the fuck not? if that's how you want to spend this last time on the Titanic, do it. Otherwise not. But there's not it's not some winning formula that if I don't have kids, we'll save the planet. That is horseshit. Absolute horseshit. That's the thinking that got us into trouble in the first place, and the thing that'll fuck up the last bit of time you have left on the Titanic.
But I think that if you do,
here I'm wondering. Oh, go on, Sophie. Sorry.
I think by my experience and what I've seen is that I like to see that the people who want to bring a child in the world are going to do it when they want to, in the right way, when they have worked their shit and their mind out, and they can provide for a child a ground where there is love and where there is a good place for the child. And what Mike was referring to is also bringing a child into a system where there is school. And I think you wanted to bring up, Hugh, the principle that school, as much as religion, is a system of child abuse.
Yeah, that's a terrible subject right there. So you can't escape the prevailing culture. I realized in my 20s, long before I had kids, from friends that tried to do it. They tried to go against the prevailing culture. They tried not to let their kids have TV and stuff, and it wasn't. I saw that it didn't work. It basically they gave extra burdens to their kids, and they brought them up. They were kind of freaks. It didn't work. So I decided when I had kids that I'd always had the idea that basically my philosophy of child rearing is that basically you can feed, after you've fed kids, clothed them and loved them, from there on out you can only do harm, right? That's what Americans don't understand. They say, oh, that's just the basics. I want to do the best for my kid. And they say, that thought is fucking them up from day one. Basically, it's like a plant. It can grow, give it sunlight and water and love it and stuff. And it's going to grow. It's going to do its plant thing. And you accept whatever fruit it turns out. And if it turns out to be a fruit or not, you take that. You take whatever this thing is going to grow into it. You take it and you love it. And that's what child rearing is about. If you start fucking around with it and say, well, I want it to grow faster and I want it to grow like this and I want it to bear more fruit, and then you're fucked up. See, for all my life in America, this has been a problem, is that my kids, I couldn't get it together to homeschool. I tried to homeschool my kids a bit and stuff, and I just couldn't get all of this together. I had to accept that they're going to go through the school system. You can't do a lot about that. Now, in that school system, then it was a continual problem for me that all the other parents, we're talking like 7-year-olds on a football pitch, a soccer pitch, playing soccer. And these parents would be going, Mike, you must know what this. They were going up and down the side. English people would have a fit. But they go up and down the sideline yelling at their kids, like, fucking, and then these guys said, like, every goal you get, I'll take you to McDonald's. And like some other father said, okay, well, I'm going to give you $10 for every goal. And they said, like, fucking 7-year-olds. I say, just let them kick the fucking ball around and have some fun with that kick. But they going to make a success and teach them. And all they're doing is making the kids hate soccer. So by the time they're 12, and they have the choice to drop out of soccer, they drop out of soccer and take drugs because their father did them. Their father made it the worst experience known to man. And then what these guys would do, they would go, I would just be sitting there marveling at this, and they would come to me and they'd say, I don't understand how you can be so calm. And I say, they're 7. Chill out, man. And they couldn't, because they had these plans, and because they had this ownership narrative. They have this capital ownership narrative. And you say, like, the first thing is, if you have kids, they are not yours. They are people. Basically, my kids are so damn good. Everybody says, how can you have kids? Because I try to make them break the law every day. I said, fight, break the law, do something bad. And they went, no, Dad, we can't do that. No, they're such good kids. And I was like, then my despair. I'm trying to make them into terrorists. But then they haven't got a single bean of credit. I've got stepkids as well, and I said to them, to my wife, we've got to get them credit cards. We've got to make sure that they get loaded up with debt, so they understand the debt system. And they were like, "Oh, please, Mom, don't make Dad get us into debt, please." And so the net result was they haven't borrowed anything. They don't have credit cards. They've never had a bean. They put themselves through college. They never borrowed a bean, because it's the exact reverse psychology. But it's you cannot bring kids up. It's fatal to think you can bring kids up. You can fuck them up. Yeah, in a million ways you can fuck them up. That's guaranteed. But you cannot do anything for them. You can deprive them. But if they ask you for something, then you give it. But like, you don't do anything they don't ask for, right? It's just America. America is just basically 300 million people abusing their kids in terms of religion, in terms. Okay, now that is a terrible waste. And talking about having kids in front of the steamroller, putting kids in college and school now is, what the fuck are you thinking? I mean, are you really such a damn fool collapse denier that you can't see the Arctic melting? And then you're putting kids into like junior school during a fucking pandemic? Are you fucking insane? It's basically, what do you think what is this for? It's the most retarded form of childcare. Is about the best you can get away from it. But you are socializing for a system that's dead. It's dying. It's late stage capitalism. They are put in those in regimentation, what they call socialization, to prepare them and stream them for factories and armies. So basically, they put them in ranks to put them in front of machine guns and put them in front of machines. In terms of basically to turn them into producers. It's like, okay, already AI has taken their jobs, right? The machines have taken their jobs. So if you're putting a kid in school now, 12 years from now, there's nothing for them to do. What the hell are you wasting these 12 years for? During a fucking pandemic too, is what are you thinking? You're turning them into a depressed. It's just our denial, our collapse denial, is turning into child abuse in the schools, because we schooling, going through the motions of schooling people for a system that's already died, right? The system that they were schooling them for in the German industrial model that Gatto talks about it's gone. It's gone. You can see it's gone before they get out of school, let alone college. So if you're a college age kid, if you think you're going to college to get a meal ticket, this is not the fucking 50s. Even 20 years ago, you can look at the benefit of having a college education. It's upside down. So they don't tell you that. Right? They don't tell you that you're wasting your time in college because you'll never get it paid back. But if you think you're going to retire if you're trying to emulate your baby boomer parents, now you're fucking retarded. Yeah, I mean, there's no other word for it. You're just insane. and the baby boomers, my age, our age, guys, we're a bunch of cunts, to put it mildly, because we're taking rent out of this, you know, on the Titanic. We're sucking rent out of the youth. We're basically inflating all the asset prices. So like David Attenborough kind of guy is like, oh, he's a national treasure. He's a fucking cunt, because he's bowing out, taking the last cookies off the table, and then dying and leaving you to foot the bill, right? If you, Mike, your age and millennials, everybody, David Attenborough and my generation have raided your fucking cookie jar and left nothing for you. It's fucking empty. But David Attenborough says, oh, don't riot, don't fuck up my twilight years with, like that. It's like, I want to be peaceful around my old age home before I duck out. So it's like, it's absolutely unconscionable. And the baby boomers are not telling people the obvious. Say, like, what are you studying for? You're wasting your prime years on a dying planet,
But I'm telling that to my daughter, for example, who's got 2 kids, and one in secondary school just started there, and they just look at me